Alright, so today we're going to take the pattern we've made in Photoshop and put it onto a cylinder and divide our cylinder up so it's the right texel density and set up for bringing it into the engine eventually. But today we're just going to take that and make a cylinder, bring it into Zbrush, and use a couple of different ways to use that cylinder we've cut up. One from the pattern we made and another one just off the cuff that we'll just do our own pattern types inside of it. So to do that, I need to make sure everybody understands this is the pattern we're going to use. I've made it not black and white, and this is copyrighted stuff, so this isn't for a client or anything, it's just a show. You know, we'll just go from there and from that. And then I'll just go to the top and I will say this cylinder, and I'm going to make a cylinder, and since I know it's supposed to be a texel density of 20.48, I know that I want to make sure my 2048 texture fits on a 1 meter by 1 meter plane. So, and that's the size of the texture in the engine that we're going to use. So if I go to front and we look at this, I just need to make this the size of a meter. So I'll go 1 meter, and that's 100 centimeters because I'm using centimeters. And then the other thing I figured out is 15 is about the right width for it to be a meter on the back. So the other thing I need to do, just like my other Photoshop files, I want to cut this up, and it'll help me when I make my own, but it's just a good way to keep your head in making sure everything's working. So I'll say collapse this down to an editable poly, go to 2 for edit edge mode, control, or I'll just do my shortcut is Control C, but I'm going to do a connect. Remember connect is? Connect, and then I'll grab these two, then I'll do another connect, and then I'll grab these two and do another connect, and then I'll just grab this top one and do another connect. So I should have a 1024, 1024, 512, a 512, a 512, and a 256 by 256 if this is a 2048. So from that, I need to take a look at it, and I'm going to come up here and take off the top and bottom because those don't matter because we're just trying to get a texture out of this. So I'll go to front, and then the other thing I need to do is throw that material on it just so I know it's working. I'll throw it on there first, and we see it's working and it actually lines up pretty good, but I'm never happy with it just magically lining up. So I'm going to go into my UVs real quick, make sure the UVs are working the way I think they should, and it looks like they're pretty close, but as you can see they're a little bit off. So I'm just going to do it, I'm making sure they're right, and I know if there's this extension or they're longer than they need to be or distorted, I'll know. So I'll just click on one of these edges and then click on this unfold strip from a loop, and what it'll do is take this whole object and unfold it correctly, and then you'll notice it's also upside down. So I'm going to rotate it twice, then I'm going to come up here, go to pack UVs, and then go Z so I can see, zoom in, and you can see that it's a little bit off, and that's fine. If we look at it over here, we can see where it's still pretty good, but I can probably just take that little bit extra that it needs and put it in there and see if it's close on that side, and it looks really close on this side. So that's good enough for me. Alright, so we have that set up, and then I can say convert to editable poly, and then I'm going to grab it and export it out. Export that selection, go to select cylinder, say yes, say okay, and then we'll jump over to Zbrush. Okay, here we are in Zbrush, and I have a cylinder that's made in Zbrush, so I'm just going to replace it or import the other Zbrush model or the 3 Studio Max model. So I'll say import, and I'll come over to wherever that is, come over to here and go to cylinder 1 FBX, import it in, say okay, and put it like that, and now that came in, and you'll see it came in even with the textures on it, which is great. So if I hold shift and F, or click shift and F, I can see, if I turn off the textures here, which is down here, texture map, turn it off, that it has my subdivisions in there for me too. Everything is even, it looks right. Turn the textures back on. The only thing you can notice is the textures are upside down, which will come into play. It's the way that Zbrush likes to do stuff. So all we have to do is go into our texture drop down, and if you don't know where that is, it's up here. I can close it. Texture, click on that button, and it pops. So well, if I clicked on that button, it would have popped it over there. Click on that button, pop it over there, and then I'll find that texture we're using right here. And yeah, and I'll just say flip V, and then I'll come back to here and I'll say this one, this one, and get this up there too. again here. Weird. There it is. Okay. So now it's divided in the right spot. I'm not sure which one I messed it up with. I did this before, so it was probably some leftover stuff. So the first way I want to do this, I'm going to show you a couple ways to do this, is we're going to use this pattern we had, and we're going to go ahead and just extrude it out. But to be able to do that, the first thing we should probably do is divide this into different polygroups. So to divide things into polygroups, all we have to do is separate them, hide parts of it, and then change that one thing that's not hidden to a different polygroup, and then unhide everything and do the same thing over and over again. So if I hold Control Shift and I drag a box around the top part of the cylinder, and notice that I'm not just doing just the cylinder, I'm going over, because this selection will only hide, keep things unhidden that are completely engulfed by this box. So I say that, and you'll see that's all that's left there. And if I click Control W, it'll change that polygroup. And if I hold Control Shift again and click, it'll unhide everything. Then I'll do the same thing for this one. Control W, click, and then Control W, click, Control W, oops, click, Control W, click, and Control W, click. And then this one I don't like because the colors are very similar, so I'll Control W until I find something I like better, click, and then this one too. Look at these three are very similar. It's just the way that ZBrush is coloring things. You know, it's not like a big deal, but it sometimes comes up when you're doing stuff inside of Substance Painter. Anyway, so I have these all divided now. That's great. This will allow me to smooth it out and do a bunch of stuff without breaking the form, and a bunch of other little things when I start sculpting by hand. So all I need to do at this point is come up to Geometry and tell it to crease polygroups. And if the crease isn't open, it's crease, drop down, crease polygroups, and it creased that up for me. Now, before I do anything else, what I'm going to do is duplicate this and rename them. I'm going to name this one High Res, and we'll call this Extrude. And then I'm going to duplicate it. Control Shift D is the duplicate thing. If you want to come over here, you can see that it says that. And I'll come to this one, and I'm going to rename this, instead of Extrude, I'll call this Sculpt. And then I'm going to Control Shift D again to duplicate it, and this time I'm going to name it, I don't use the word low res anymore, I use game res, because it varies so much that low res is not a really correct term, and some things are millions of polys. So I have 3 different versions of it. This will help me when I export these out of here to make sure they're all exactly the same scale without going into why ZBrush does it the way it does or whatever. This is just the simplest way to keep everything even and clean. So I'm going to be working on this top one, and I'm going to push Control D. If I look inside of the Geometry menu, I push Control D, it'll divide it up. I'll hide this crease now. And because I have it creased, it won't lose the edge border information. So Control D, Control D, Control D. I'm going to do it about 8 times. It depends on what your computer can handle, but I want to get it up to over 1 million, 2 million's fine, just so I can get enough resolution out of it. The first way we're going to do this is, there's a couple of ways we could do this, but the simplest way for me, in my opinion, is to go into the surfaces, and we'll go to Noise, and then we're going to look at this. This is actually a button, so if you click on that, it actually opens up the option to look at it, and we'll come in here and say, use this on here, and then you'll see that if I turn up the strength, it shows up, and it's actually in the right height, everything. But you'll notice it's all noisy and stuff. Well, that's because noise is what this is for, so I can turn this to 0, and that should fix it. And it's probably a little too high or a little too low, depending on which way you want to go. So I'm going to push it out by going negative, and it's going negative because it's black, so black pushes it out instead of going inward if it was positive. So I have it like that, and I'll just say it. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and Shift F to get rid of my polygroups. Now this is not working correctly because I didn't do something inside of there, which is okay because we can go back and edit. But the other thing you should know is this is not final. This is just a proximity, just a fake version. So go back into edit, and if we look at it from the side, we can see that stretch, and that's because it's just projecting that image that we have straight down the center, the front of this object, and then to the back. So that's not what we want. But since we've unwrapped it, we know we can just push this UV button, and then it flipped it upside down. So What we might want to do, since we're using UV and it flipped it upside down, is we come into here and we'll go that pattern 2, and I flipped it for us so it's facing the right direction. And then, yeah, I think that works. I'm actually not sure if I want it negative. I think I want it positive. There we go. So the noise scale doesn't really matter. We don't care about that. Alpha scale will make it too big, so we want to keep this at 1. If yours isn't set to 1, it won't be 1:1 ratio. Mask and all this stuff. There's a lot of other options inside of here that I don't use, and some of them work and some of them don't, or I haven't figured them out. But this will work for now. We have this, and like I said, this is not really there. It's fake. So all I need to do is apply it to make it work. And I can change a bunch of little things in here, but for now, this is all I'm looking for us to do. So I'll push that button, and lo and behold, it works. It's doing a little cleaning itself up as I turn it around, but now we're done. And next, on to the other one. Okay, so now we're gonna try and do it with the other one. We're gonna come to the high-res sculpt. We're gonna go ahead and hide everything else and just leave the high-res sculpt open. And then we're going to look at this and say, first off, we need to get rid of this, turn that off, and we're going to say, okay, we still have it all broken into pieces, so that's great. So we do want to up-res it, so up-res, 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 up-res. There we go, 2 million, perfect. So there you go, we have 2 million quads, and now what's really cool about it is that we can hide and unhide things by just doing this. If I want to work on this trim up here, I can do that. Okay, so when we sculpt in here, it's not that bad. We can just do the little, sculpt. Let me get my brush here, and we'll go to Dynamesh or Damien Standard or something, and we can just sculpt out whatever we want. The problem is we want to keep it like a pattern, so we need to think in a way that doesn't keep it super, everything we have to draw by hand over and over again, because that would be insane. So what we can do is turn on a transform that allows us to, from the front view here, sculpt like this. So now it's doing it in 2 directions because I put on what's called mirror or symmetry. And the X is the shortcut for that, but that's still not really what we want to do. So let's take a look and see if we turned on symmetry in the Z for the front and back. And we did this. And I come back. Oh, that's cool. It does those. So now I just have to draw from here to here, and hopefully they all link together. So if I do this, they all kind of link together. But there's even another thing you can do. If I go back to the front and I come and open up the transform options here, I'll just click on this, pop it over here, and then I say radial and turn off Y and Z and just do, or X and Z and do Y. What it's going to allow me to do is draw a circle and another circle and so forth, and I can get those. And the amount of how many times it repeats itself is based off of the radial count. So if I change this radial count to 20, and I go to something like a regular standard brush, and I think I was messing with this earlier, so we'll turn that to dots, change this to alpha, and then I do like, I don't know, also my lazy mouse is on, so stroke. Open this up. There's a shortcut for it. I'm not sure why. Oh, this should be at like 0.2. And if I do this. Okay, let's do one. Okay. So I'm going to turn off lazy mouse, and there we go. Okay, so now I can just come in here and figure out where they meet usually, and then kind of do whatever I may want. Now I can make the brush stronger by just coming in here and changing the vocal strength. So it goes something like this, and then something like this, and then I can come back in here and tighten this up a little bit, maybe smooth it out, and then I can do something like aligned for the forward, and I can change my brushes around and get something I like, and and I can smooth it out or whatever I want to do. And I'm probably better off going back to Alt to do this. So say Alt, like that, and then I'll put a dot here. here, and I'll put it on here. And then I'll shrink this and say this, and this, and maybe I'll do another circle inside of this one, and do something else inside of here, and smooth it a little bit. You know, just at this point, it's just take some time and figure out what you want it to look like. I'm just making stuff up here. You can also come back into unhide everything, Control Shift and click, and then come over to our geometry menu and do something like clay polish and click on that. If that's any better. Just tighten it up, make it a little bit harder edged for me and cleaner. And then, you know, you can add to it, you can go hog wild on it, and then you can just jump to the next one and do whatever you're gonna do over here. And then come up with a pattern that you like, and eventually you'll start to like it. And just look at other patterns from the time and you'll be set to go. So that's basically the two ways to do it. And then next we'll talk about exporting these out, putting them into Substance Painter and using them. And then we can also use our black and white mask in Substance Painter. We can decide which way we like it better. I personally like them on the normals you get from actual geometry, but you know, you can take a look and see how they both work. And we'll do that next.